Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday, August 20th, 2015 meeting of the East Long Meadow Charter Commission. First, I'd like to ask if anyone here is electronically recording this meeting, and if so, please state your name. We'll start.
Chris Gaudreau from Midland.
And?
Marge Baraka.
Thank you. And we are also being recorded by LCAT. Next, we'll do roll call. Why don't we start over here?
George Kingston.
Eric Madison.
Bill Fonseca.
Larry Levine.
Dawn Starks.
Ray Miller.
Tom O'Connor. Russell Denver.
Ralph Page.
And if our consultants could introduce themselves as well.
Sure, Tanya Stepashuk.
Mike Ward.
And they are from the Collins Center. I thought first, just to knock it out, let's get the minutes out of the way. Have you all had a chance to read them?
Yes.
Marge's fingers must have hurt a lot.
On the bottom.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Discussion? Amendments?
Looks good.
Yes.
They look good.
2 points, Madam. On the first page, there's a statement, the chairman announced that the legislative form will be town council. It almost sounds like the dictatorship.
Well, we know it is not.
No. If someone's reading this a year from
Right,
now,
they could read-
that's a result of the motion that was approved.
Yes, we will amend that as results.
And the other thing, if someone's reading this at a later date, about the legislative branch article about eligibility, you refer to the first paragraph under eligibility. Probably it should be reprinted there.
Right, I got confused on that myself. I'm glad you brought that up. So that would be, and Marge, I can get that to you. That would be, any registered voter of the town shall be eligible for election to the council. However, no person holding another elected office of the town as established in this charter or any town ordinance shall take the oath or affirmation of office as councillor. And then we could state the vote, correct?
Yes, they're in
Yes.
2 different places.
So we should, that was a synopsis, I believe, and would you like, do you think it should be inserted in both places or just in the top?
If you're going to do one, you may as well do both.
Okay. So Marge, I'll double check with you and we'll insert in both places so it reflects that. Any other amendments, changes?
Make a motion to accept the amendments as stated.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good.
So now we have to
Yeah,
accept the
You have to go
minutes.
back and do
Do
the
a motion to
motion.
accept them as amended.
Who, I'm sorry. Would you like to?
Eric moved to accept the minutes.
Larry did.
Yeah.
Larry
But,
did, sorry.
yeah.
So remove the main motion with the amended.
So I move it?
No, you can't move it.
No, you've moved it.
I moved it.
And I'll second.
Okay. All in favor? Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Okay. Thank you. I got the discussion part. All right. Now, as you recall, we moved along fairly rapidly last time, where we did determine our legislative branch would be a town council. And we had our handy dandy fill in the blank. Just a quick recap, and that we voted that, let's see. We went all the way through 3-year term. We got onto the second page. Correct me if I'm wrong. We got through that first paragraph. And what I had written as notes to myself were that we had discussions, and this was kind of things we needed to ruminate upon for these 2 weeks, were precincts versus at large.
There was something I thought we had to go back to before that, though.
we also had restrictions on whether an employee could be a town council.
Yeah, I think that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, why don't we start, I'm assuming everyone has had a chance to chew on this. We can either start with open discussions again about precinct versus at-large, or someone could make a motion and we discuss it that way.
I'll make a motion then. I make a motion that all 7 members of the council are elected at large.
I'll second that.
Okay, very good. Discussion.
My change of heart, because if you recall, I was kind of leaning toward having some from specific sections of town. Some of it was as a result of the data information that was provided during the off weeks by the Collins Center. But I also kind of thought an awful lot about it, and I went back to, who was it, Tom? You and I went to Palmer, wasn't it, you and I? I went back to Palmer, and although I believe that if this passes, we'll have no problem getting people to run for the first council, maybe even for 2 or 3 years after that. But I think eventually, just like we've seen with every other elected board, eventually I think you're going to have trouble filling some of the seats from a specifically small area. So for those reasons, I make this motion.
When I looked at the precinct map that Marge sent out, I kind of, because I was on the fence precinct or not, and probably to Eric's point, some of the precincts aren't equally divided across town. They're not equally populated. Okay, so we possibly could have difficulty in 1 or 2 of the precincts somewhere down the line finding people. And I said this at the last meeting, if you're in a precinct and somebody wants you to run, they're going to support you. So it's almost like the same thing. But it's just being done at large, that's all. So.
I had a change of heart as well. I looked at the precinct map just like Bill, and the lines are such that I raised the concern of the north end, and yet the north end is split somewhat. But then I thought more about it, and I don't know, I would hope that our present day and past elected officials didn't vote for one area or the other. And I thought more and more that the town should do things in the best interest of the entire town. And so I've changed my mind.
Anyone else?
Call the question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes. Very good. Next kind of open-ended question was the question of if a compensated town employee could run as an at-large town councilor. We
Well,
can,
So I'll take this side. So I'll make a motion that we allow compensated town employees to serve on the town council. Getting a lot of support, huh?
Second.
Thank you. So here's my rationale. I don't think we should impinge on people's rights to serve the town because they're a town employee. There are laws which you forwarded the conflict of interest information to all of us that they have to comply with. There are disclosures that they're going to have to comply with. So there are policies and procedures statewide set up to limit the actual conflict of interest and the appearance of conflict of interest. And I don't think we should take away people's rights to run for office if they want to be more involved. That's really it's kind of a democracy kind of issue.
other, Eric?
Counterpoint?
Sure.
Obviously, everyone knows I worked my 35-year career in public service in the municipal world. I actually honestly believe that the council will consider many things routinely that they have to be as neutral and as uninvolved as possible. In a small town with the small workforce that we have in this town, I don't believe that anybody who's working a compensated position can remain is unattached to the subjects and information as they need to be to make the decisions. Though that's primarily, I believe, why we should have that rule.
So can I just question there, Madam Chair?
Oh, here we go. The lawyer puts me on the stand.
So other than a actual budget discussion for their department and or appointment of a department head for their department, what other potential conflicts do you see that individual having?
A multitude of, I mean, if you look back at the history of decisions that the Board of Selectmen have made, they have impacts on various departments at various times. And I think that, I know that I was for example, I was a department head. I developed a relationship, working relationship, and oftentimes a friendship with other department heads and other employees of the town.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I know it would have been difficult for me to make some of the decisions that come before the Board of Selectmen and not feel influenced by those friendships or relationships.
But is it an actual conflict of interest under the law or a perceived conflict of interest because you're friendly with someone?
I don't know that it's necessarily, no, an actual, but I think it has, I don't think it has any place in the council members'
So in this
decision-making.
small town, we've heard allegations, of, oh, they appointed this person because they're friends with their mother or their father or their neighbor. It happens every day. So I think the law has been established to have parameters set up, what are considered to be actual conflicts of interest under the conflicts of interest law. That, you know, obviously we all had to take the test, and they would have to take the test. And if there was a problem, someone could file a complaint. I think it kind of works its way out a little bit. I think we have to put a little more faith in people and the people who are going to run for office. I think sometimes the press, present company excluded, of course, the press just kind of plays things up a little too much into conflicts or into appearances of conflicts of interest where none exist. And this is my opinion.
I'd like to point out that we're talking about a town council here, not a board of selectmen.
Right.
We're talking about a body that is going to do what town meeting does, not what the board of selectmen does. It's a legislative body, not an executive body. They will probably have a veto power over appointments made by the executive, but remember, we're talking about 7 members. So, you know, hopefully we'll have a diverse group of people there. It's not one person making those decisions.
That's the other reason for I think you should allow it, because you'd have 6 other individuals who would be, hopefully there's a certain amount of self-policing going on.
You're making an assumption that only one member would be a town.
I know.
What if 4 or 5 of them are town employees?
Yeah.
Then shame. Then if
Then
the
you
people
don't-
don't like it, shame on them. They shouldn't elect all of them.
I think shame on us if we allow a
Right.
system that allows that.
But I think, on the other hand, there may be reviews in this down the road. So if they see these issues happening, there are going to be ways to change it. So I think there's a system of checks and balances in place. Because inherently, we've already talked about reviews, you know, timed, you know, let's say
Charter
5 years down the road.
reviews.
Term reviews, so, or charter reviews. So there will be people, we're just establishing the groundwork here. This isn't a finished product by any means. So if something isn't working, the opportunity is going to be there to change it.
I'd like to ask, I mean, board of selectmen we have now, there's no legal restraint on a town employee running for the board of selectmen. Does anyone remember the last time a town, yes?
Art Moses.
I'm sorry?
Art Moses,
Yeah.
Okay, and how long ago was that?
probably 30 years ago.
Okay.
And there weren't any actual problems. I'm not familiar enough that he recused himself from discussions on schools, because he was an employee of the schools. I don't know of any other town employee since then.
Was that before ed reform?
Ed reform was in '93.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Other discussion?
I just want to make a point of record. I'm going to abstain from this vote, being the only part-time town employee on this commission.
Compensated, yes.
So I feel it would be in a conflict on my part to vote on this.
Well,
I
actually,
will stay out of the discussion and the vote.
Ralph and I are also part-time town employees, elected ones.
So am I.
And
Technically.
as members of the appropriations, we're compensated $300 a year.
Right, we're all compensated.
So,
I'm compensated for being in the school committee, so I
So
mean,
Larry, it's you and me.
so I'm not sure if that, I mean, I don't think that matters. I
And
really,
I also think that goes to the heart of the matter. I tend to fall in the camp, and I've given it careful consideration, that if we exclude people from running, what pool would there be? And to George's point, this is the legislative body replacing town meeting. We don't stop teachers at town meeting if they live in town and they pay their taxes on voting on the budget.
the budget.
I also agree that I think we need to give, I know politicians have gotten a dirty name. I don't believe that completely. Yes, there are problems, and they always rise to the top, and they become headlines. But the average person who lives in town, is working hard, understands what's going on, will recuse themselves, as Russ has pointed out. That conflict of interest law is pretty strong. The state is pretty strong. And if not, I would hope that another member might gently nudge and just say, hey, we're voting on the police budget, and
You should
you're a
recuse yourself.
patrolman. You need to recuse, because education is key in it. I understand your point exactly, but we are a small town relatively, and everyone knows everyone, so there's going to be conflict there, perhaps. I'm hoping that everyone would take the high road, and I'm confident as I sit here and I look around, and we start with Tom talking about himself, and we're going around and everyone's saying, well, you know, there are inherent conflicts that are just going to come up, and I guess I'm on the record as being in the camp of let them run.
I just want to read the motion that we passed last week, just as a reminder. So we passed the town charter shall include a legislative branch comprised of a town council who shall have all general, corporate, legislative, and appropriations powers over all town business and departments.
It's
That-
bigger than town meeting, I agree.
Yeah, it's not, I'm sorry, it's simply, it's not a group of people that are
Yeah.
saying yay or nay
Right.
on articles.
Right.
So it is much broader than that of our current legislative body. This council is gonna make many decisions that have direct and indirect impacts on a multitude of departments in the operations of the town.
So, but let's just use a police officer, lives in town, okay? So I would hope that if a police officer got elected to the town council, just hypothetical, you know, clearly they wouldn't vote on the police budget, they wouldn't vote on a collective bargaining, you know, financial order, they wouldn't vote on, let's say, reaffirming the appointment of a police chief. But I see nothing wrong with voting on zone changes, voting on, issuing licenses for various things that don't impact, the police department. I think because of that motion that you just said, there's gonna be a much larger variety of issues that individual would be able to vote on and participate. And I think sometimes there's going to be a value in having a viewpoint of a town employee.
So you brought up collective bargaining as one of the points. And under the conflict of interest laws, it would not be a conflict for that council member, who's also a police officer, to vote on a bargaining issue of another collective bargaining unit than one that he belongs in. However, after 35 years of dealing with collective bargaining and dealing with the unions, you have a rough time telling me that he doesn't have at least an indirect, if not even a direct, interest in the collective bargaining issues of other bargaining units in town. That's just one example of many that I can,
And I'm not disputing that with you, but certainly there's a fine line in what the state ethics laws allow. And I think that we should utilize the laws that are in front of us and operate accordingly. But I see exactly where you're coming from, because they all talk to each other. We know that. We wish departments would all talk to each other.
Not only that, but there's an indirect pressure on them when they're voting on anything financial involving somebody else, if they're involved also in the collective bargaining. I have to agree with Eric. As much as we're going to look at them and say, yes, they can be part of town meeting and they can speak up as a town employee, we're looking at a small group of people that are going to be that legislative body. And I think they need to be separate from the town employees. They are the employees of that board, and I don't think that they should be part of the board.
Just for record, right now, how many town employees are we looking at? 500, 600? I mean, is that roughly what we're looking at?
that's probably a good estimate.
So we're looking at excluding 600 people from possibly running.
No,
No,
because
they
not
don't all
all
live
employees
here.
are a resident.
Yeah, they don't all live here.
So call it 400, call it 300, potentially.
I mean, that's a lot of people to exclude. I mean, my initial thought was, you know, if you're on the council, you shouldn't hold a job in town. You know, that was my quick once-over look at it. But then considering how many people we're excluding from the possibility, because there may be a conflict at some point in time and they may not recuse themselves. I mean, I would like to have faith in the people that if something's coming in front of them, that they're going to do the right thing. I would have to side more with Russ on it.
But again, you know, somebody said, there's gonna be 6 other members to
Self-police. Yeah.
self-police. So it's not like we're turning an individual loose and, you know, it's one vote. It's not gonna, it could make or break, but just, you know, there's enough checks and balances, I think.
Well, and that's operating from the assumption that only one member is a
Right,
town employee.
right. No, it's all valid points.
And as ridiculous as it sounds, you're not taking away their right. They can take a leave or they can do all kinds of things. Now, I know that's ridiculous because who's going to give up their bread and butter to pay their bills to run for a council seat? But they have that option. So it's not that we're restricting them of their right. We're not. It's just that they have some other hoops to jump through to exercise that right.
You have anything?
No, I'm convinced letting anyone run. I've seen people recuse themselves, and I would at least try it at the beginning and see how it develops. I understand exactly what you're saying. I don't think any of us are that naive to think there isn't some indirect pressure.
Call the question.
Call the vote. All those in favor of having unrestricted membership to the town council, vote by saying aye.
Well, no,
Or no.
we're not having unrestricted, because we're not
Right.
allowing other,
Right.
Elected.
other elected.
Elected.
Can I just jump in here, because I think when this all shakes out as to how this is gonna look within the charter, is that we're not going to have, if this is the way the vote goes, that we aren't going to have a prohibition section as is found in other town charters. So we're talking about the eligibility section, which would not include any prohibitions of
Okay.
town employees.
So it would be left pretty much,
Yeah, I mean, we can
As it
decide
is.
on the language that,
Yeah.
of, you know, who is eligible,
Yeah.
but it's not gonna include these specific
Right, yeah, I think we all
prohibitions.
agreed on the very first paragraph in your section.
Right.
Okay.
It was, in fact, I think the thing that hung us up was this very
Exactly.
motion that was
And
made, yeah.
I hope everyone got, we have a new version with a lot more examples that's out there. I hope
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
made its way
Yes.
to everyone else. So if there's particular towns that you see in here that have, you know, precisely the language you like, or we wanna rewrite some of them, you know, just keep that in mind. But this is, to leave out any of these prohibitions sections.
so in light of that,
So his motion was simply to allow compensated employees to run for,
Yeah.
Right.
or to serve as a council.
And you can edit it accordingly.
Yeah.
Well, we'll put
Yeah.
something together,
Yeah.
and we're gonna
There you go.
finalize this.
Yeah.
okay. So all those in favor of that, state aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
All right, motion passes. And
Doug, do you
Tanya,
mind, do you mind if I jump in? And
oh, no, jump.
Because that's excellent. We basically have the eligibility section then taken care of. But I did want to jump back when we get a moment here, since, but those were the big things I know we had left out there from our past meeting. If we look back at the composition and membership of town council, there were a couple little things there that we might just want to, revisit, hopefully not too long here. The first was whether we wanted to have a compensation section in there. Some
Yeah,
do,
I-
some don't.
I had a question. So if they don't have compensation in there, how do they handle it?
Do you have any, there's still a possibility, it's just not outlined there.
They handle it as they see fit?
I suppose there are some that may not have any stipend or compensation whatsoever, and therefore would require, in certain cases, a charter change to actually do that. And others I've seen in the transition section language similar to what is in the legislative branch section here about the start point of the salary and then how it gets adjusted.
I like that. I like you start at the current compensation level of the current Board of Selectmen, just to get it off the ground.
Okay.
The current Board of Selectmen, I believe the chairman is compensated higher.
Yeah.
than
Well, we
Yeah.
would make that the president.
That would be the president.
President
Just
would.
making sure that,
Yep.
that language
What
is
is the
in there if we
current
do it.
compensation of the Board of Selectmen?
$2,000 for
I
the
thought it was
chair.
either 2,000 or 3,000.
Yeah, I think it's-
I don't think it's anything more than
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
And then like
2,500.
25?
And I thought it was 3,000 for the chairman. I think it's 3,000 for the chairman and 2,500 for
Cool.
both other members.
Okay, without getting hung up on the exact numbers,
Right.
would someone like to make a motion that that would be the starting point?
I'll move that the starting point for the council be the current rate of the Board of Selectmen.
I'll second that.
Well, and then do we want to just then in thereafter, their compensation shall be set forth in the annual budget?
Yeah, like it's.
Yeah.
Like it's worded there?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so please recap.
And then in here, there's when if they said it, when does it take effect?
Well, it would take effect, it says, as part of the annual town budget, so it would take effect July 1st.
Okay, because there was some here, I think, who waited another year or
Oh.
something
Right,
like
no.
that.
All right, so I'll move to set the compensation rate at the current rate of the Board of Selectmen. Thereafter, the compensation rate shall be set in the annual town budget.
I'll second that.
Right, so that would give us
Right.
a year.
Yeah.
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 And second, You did, okay. Discussion now. Eric?
I mean, I'm not gonna get hung up on this one, this is kind of small, but I'm of the belief that we should probably try to decide what would be a fair compensation and set that, because if 2,500 isn't fair, if it's more, then, you know, very early on, you're putting this council in the position of voting their own fair compensation, which is always a political nightmare. Do we want to do that to the first council? That's the only thing I'm throwing out there.
But is that part of a charter
I don't think.
to establish the first pay rate?
Well, that's what we're doing.
Well, that's what we're doing, but we're
Well,
not.
I think we have the opportunity to establish the pay rate, period.
I don't think that's our job.
We're doing the first.
I think that until the council actually gets a chance to meet and begins to appreciate the job that they've got, how much time that they're putting into it, and so on and so forth, it's difficult to set a compensation. I mean, it's not a full-time job any more than being a select board member is a full-time job. On the other hand, it is very time-intensive. I don't think most people are going to run for counselor for the money.
Yeah.
I mean, quite frankly.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I mean, we're just setting a base.
As part of that base in this discussion, there's many areas where it mentions reasonable expenses too. Would that be part of this decision?
That's
Or is that a
separate.
separate
That's a
vote?
different-
Okay.
So here's
But
a,
it should be part of our conversation, I would think, because it's the broad scope here.
here's a question for Labor Council.
All right, Tim?
Yes.
So
All right,
what
now I'll
impact-
answer.
What impact does this have on a town employee that's gonna serve as council?
Well, I thought I saw some language in there that you can't be
Mhm.
compensated both ways.
That's correct.
So we should have to put that caveat in there.
Right.
So are they then eligible for overtime? When they serve on the council?
I'll, no.
No, it's not part of their
It's
job.
not part of the
Why
job.
why not?
It's not part of their job.
Well,
It's
first
work.
off, you don't
No.
set the number of
Different
hours.
job.
What's
for a
that?
you're not setting the number of hours for a
Yeah.
council. It's just like
But their
the planning
employer is
board
the
members.
department, their employer is the town.
They are employees of the town.
Sure.
They're special then they become a special employee
Yeah.
of the town.
If so
So-
designated by the council.
So designated, so I would suspect that would be the cutting off point, so they wouldn't get overtime. Now, it's just not something I've researched, but it's a wonderful question.
I could just see
It's
that
a
one.
wonderful question.
I mean, that is something we could
Yeah,
research
yeah,
if we're,
yeah.
you know,
That's a
if
good
we're
question,
considering
yeah.
this
Well, I
all this
don't,
different
you know,
language.
I mean,
Yeah.
I know that we're,
Yeah, it's a
let
great
ourselves get
question.
all hung up on it,
Yeah.
unless,
Yeah.
of course, you want
Yeah.
to revisit the previous question.
I just knew that was coming.
But I think all we're doing is setting a base and let them, you know,
Decide thereafter.
let it,
yeah.
yeah.
I just would rather see it like twice that low.
I'm
I
not
think that-
following.
So,
You
Eric,
would want to set the salary from day one and continue how long?
Well, they're.
No, I'm okay with, you know, the council readdressing that. I just don't want to put the council in their second year of having to address the issue.
How do you get around that?
Set a compensation rate that's fair now.
Fair now.
but I agree with George, you don't know what is going to be
Yeah.
fair
Right.
Well,
until you
I
actually
think we
know.
could all agree that they're gonna put in a tremendous amount of time, and I think we could all agree that what the Board of Selectmen are getting now is a pittance compared to the time they put in.
Well, I respectfully disagree, because if you go to I think if you go to a mayoral form of government, I think the mayor takes on a whole lot more of the responsibilities. If you go to a town manager, I think the town council becomes more involved. And just from what I've seen in my 30 years of doing all this. So I think that's a big point right there. So I don't think that we can naturally assume that they're going to double or even triple the amount of work that the Board of Selectmen are doing right now until we've kind of made that executive decision.
No, I'm not saying their work is gonna be double or triple. But what I am saying is that the compensation the Board of Selectmen get now
Currently gets.
is not adequate. So even to be
I don't
on
disagree
par,
with
I'm
that,
thinking that
yeah.
we should set this as a little bit more in terms of adequate.
I still think it's up to the council. I mean, we're just establishing the base here.
I'd agree. Again, repeat, I don't think anybody is getting into this to make money.
Right.
This is a public service job, and it's something that they're doing because it makes them feel good, because they want to contribute to the town. The money is just sort of for the hassle that goes along with it. It's not really a salary, if you will, in my mind.
Any other comments?
One of my concerns is, I mean, I understand, and I would hope going forwards that the council would receive better compensation than this. But this is something we have to also sell to the town, if that's the way you want to word it, educate them on it. And if all of a sudden we go in and say 9 council members at $8,000 apiece, we're really upping the cost of changing government. I don't think that's our job right at the moment. I think let the council actually make that decision if they're so elected and this form of government goes forwards.
After seeing esteemed council this afternoon, I gave that some consideration. So if we get to the
By
point,
accident, we saw it.
yeah, by accident, yeah. If we get to the point where we perhaps eliminate some other elected boards that are being compensated, you could actually, because we're thinking of talking points moving forward, you could actually calculate how much the planning board is paid, the assessors are paid, Board of Public Works is paid. I don't know if the library board makes any money.
No.
Appropriations makes a whole $2,100 between the 7 of them. And it might actually end up being
At the base rate,
a neutral,
probably.
you know, when you kind of add it all up together.
I would
So,
agree at the
but-
base rate.
Yeah, at the current rate.
But if we increase this to what we think their compensation should be,
Well,
I
that's
think we're
different.
gonna, exactly.
But to start with.
And to start with, I would agree with the language that's here.
May I throw one other item into this discussion, which relates both to this question and to the language that you are discussing. The example legislative document that we sent this week has a whole bunch of other ways to phrase compensation. You'll note that almost all of the others put either an election or time or both in between when it is voted and when it takes effect, in a stronger way than the one that you had from the prior meeting, which basically says set in the annual town budget. So if you look at some of the language in the other examples, you may see a little bit more of a buffer, which is just something that's important to consider as it ties to this discussion of
So I've read that,
concerns.
and I've seen other communities do that. Quite honestly, I think they're a bunch of chickens when they do something like that. Either you think it's worth it or you don't. And by pushing it off is a bunch of baloney. Have the nerve to vote for it or don't. It's really, it's kind of like passing the buck. And I appreciate it and love the homework that we got, which was wonderful. But
I'm ready to move the question. I mean, I didn't want to hold up all night on this. It's not that important a subject matter.
And we can adjust it later on if we change our
Yeah.
minds.
I'm sorry, what?
We can
Joe?
adjust it later on if we change our minds. I mean,
So, do we want to call it then?
we did.
Yeah.
Eric called it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Okay.
Before we leave eligibility, which we did.
Let's go back to
Let's
it.
circle
We have.
around.
Back to eligibility, there was a second part
Yes.
in the language that was recommended here that I'd like to see us consider, and that is, no, I'm sorry, I misread it. It's another section. We can move on.
Okay.
My mistake.
It wasn't the part in Pittsfield of interference with administration?
No.
Not under
Okay.
No,
eligibility.
it's in another section, and I'll bring it up when it comes up there.
And so I guess before we leave the composition and membership, which we're getting close to leaving, there were a couple of things I just wanted to make sure, since we haven't discussed, but just make sure we aren't interested in discussing them. One is there's a few charters out there that have term limits. So if that's anything people were thinking about or considering, we should talk about that. And also, we would probably put the term start date in here. So if we want to finalize, I don't know if that's been finalized as a decision of
We
the
did vote.
term. Yeah, we
July
did.
first.
Okay,
When we
so
have the election.
Yeah.
July 1st. Okay, so
That's
and
why I
this
wanted-
June
is
is the election.
so we'll
July
put that
1st was-
Yeah.
we'll put that
Started
language in
first
here as
Tuesday.
well.
Yeah.
And usually the election language goes into the election section, so we'll revisit that again, but we've already got that in our heads.
Okay. Any appetite for term limit discussion?
It's called elections.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
I agree.
I agree.
Except for Congress.
Yeah.
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 That's our next step.
Yeah.
Can we do that here?
Can't hurt.
Okay, so we are in essence done with eligibility, correct? And next we move on to officers. Yes. Which would be president, vice president, and clerk. And as you probably read in your homework, there are a few variations thereof, as well as what was presented in our sample fill in the blank.
You want a
So,
motion to get it started?
sure.
So I kind of had gone through this and liked some of the suggested language, so I'd make a motion that at the first council meeting following each regular town election, the council shall choose from its membership a president and a vice president, each to serve for a one-year term of office. Additionally, I would add, and this is the underlined section that's on the paper before you, the president shall prepare the agenda for the council meetings. The president shall preside at all the meetings of the council, regulate its proceedings, and decide all questions of order. The president shall appoint all members of committees of the council, whether special or standing. The president shall have the same powers to vote upon measures coming before the council as any other member of the council, and the president shall perform any other duties consistent with the office that are established by the charter, ordinance, or other vote of the council. The vice president shall preside in the absence of the president. I think it does a pretty good job of clearly defining the role of the president.
So I'll second it, just so we can get discussion going.
Discussion.
Oh, now he's gonna argue it.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna argue it, I'm just gonna ask you to amend it. So, I think, you know, giving the president the unfettered ability to prepare the agenda, I think we should put a caveat in there. And most of these would operate under certain rules that a council would adopt. So I would, shall prepare the agenda and preside at all meetings, regulated proceedings, and decide, you know, questions of orders pursuant to rules of the town council to be established, or rules to be established by the town council. Because let's say there's 7 people and I want to put something on the agenda and the president doesn't want to put that on the agenda, and we leave it up to him to decide.
Okay, I didn't read it that way.
Yeah.
Prepare isn't set.
Well, it
Well,
is.
It is.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is.
There would be I
Yeah.
think,
It's the same.
assumption,
I read it as
even
the
though
same.
I get what you
Okay,
mean.
I didn't read it
Yeah,
that way, but.
so that's my only, so I'm
If
not
you-
arguing with you.
Well,
Yeah, because if you had a president who
okay,
just decided to just do it, you could, this way there'd be at
So
least some backup.
we'll have the town council, one of the things they do when they get going is they will probably form a rules committee, and they'll vote on a set of rules and procedures on how to introduce items to get on the agenda. You know, so
so let me
Yeah.
offer an amendment then, because I don't disagree with you.
Okay.
Wow. Did I say that out loud?
Did you recall that?
Well,
I would amend the second part of my motion so that the previous sentence of the president shall prepare the agenda for the council meetings to now read, the president shall prepare the agenda for council meetings consistent with any rules adopted by the council.
Yep,
Okay.
I'm fine with that. Starting to feel the love you give Jim Walsh.
And I would
Is
like-
there a second on the amendment?
I'll second the amendment.
Okay.
In discussion, as I read through all the information that was provided to us by Tanya and Mike, I found one that jumped out at me, and that was this city or town of Franklin. They had a piece of language in there that I think may belong here. And that it was along the lines of what Russ was mentioning, that it's more of an oversight to temper the council from having too much of a hierarchy on a structure, so that one person makes a decision for many. The council may reorganize itself at any time during the year by 2/3 vote of its membership. I think is important language.
I agree.
I agree with that.
I was going to bring that up myself, but there needs to be the opportunity to remove the president from
Yes.
that particular office by the vote of the council. And I know 2/3 is appropriate with the 7-member council. I would say a vote of 5 members of the
Yes.
7-member council, which is a supermajority, but which gives some protection to the person in office, but does allow for removing that person for abuse of power or whatever else.
I agree.
Not that we've ever seen that
No.
happen.
You're suggesting then that 5 out of the 6 people are going to.
5 out of 7.
Well, yeah, but if
Well,
yeah.
if I'm
6.
president, you're trying to remove me, who do you think I'm going to vote for?
You never know.
So, I mean, you can almost eliminate the president, so we're looking at 5 out of 6.
That's right. A supermajority.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, I'd like to see us take it one step further and define within the charter a supermajority as 5 out of 7, because I
Yes.
think as we move on, we're
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
use that language in
Absolutely.
other
Yeah.
spots.
Yep.
All right, so now is this going to be an amendment on the amendment?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, or can we just pass this and then let Tom make a motion on?
Well, we could do it that way.
To include
Yeah.
And
his.
include it, because if we convolute this
Yeah.
motion too much, we'll be
Yes,
here
it's
until
Right.
tomorrow.
going
So I'm
to
gonna,
Right.
so I'm gonna call the amended,
Yes,
Whatever.
correct.
Right, okay.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against, nay?
Now,
That passes.
Before we go to Tom, may I make one other quick motion so that we're clear on it? That the charter further defines a supermajority as 5 out of 7 members of the council.
and I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Against?
That
nay.
way,
Should
any
have had
motions
discussion.
where we
Right.
want to include that, we all know what that means.
Okay,
And
now,
it is an option to have, as part of the charter, a definition section. Not all
Yeah.
do, but some do. And if so, we already have that locked down. We'll put
Right.
supermajority into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
yeah, that's pretty clear. Now,
I'd like to make a motion that we amend to say the council may reorganize itself at any time during the year by 2/3, or in this case, a supermajority vote of its membership, period.
I'll second that.
discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes. Okay,
What about clerk?
Now, those were both amendments. Now, do we have to go to
Yes.
the original?
Oh, I see.
Yes, we do,
Okay.
because the original motion has not been voted on.
Oh, okay,
Correct.
yep, you're right.
so, all in favor of the original?
As
As
amended.
The original
As
is
amended.
amended.
Okay, the motion as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Really keeping you hopping today.
I know, I need to brush
So
up
much
on
for
my Robert's
vacation.
rules.
Yeah.
She just used too much of it. That's what she said.
All right. Was someone mentioning about the other, we've already taken care of all of that, correct?
Oh, what?
No,
No,
clerk.
clerk, that was it.
Right, we've done move on to the clerk.
All right. So, any general discussion? I'm looking at Eric who has a type.
No, I don't recall reading anything else anywhere else, but I think the language suggested on this document is adequate and fine. I think it's clear and covers the
That's-
basis.
Right.
Want me to, everyone's find it, or do you need me to quickly read it?
Russ,
Done.
that's the way it is in Springfield.
Yeah.
correct?
That is, yep. Yep.
Okay,
And I think it works really well.
okay, would you like to put that in the form of a,
You're putting pressure on me here?
yes?
I move that we establish the language that reads, "The town clerk shall be the clerk of the council. The town clerk shall give notice of all council meetings to its members and to the public, maintain a journal of all council proceedings, and perform such other duties as may be assigned by this charter, ordinance, or other rules of the council. The town clerk shall receive no stipend for the additional duties of the clerk of the council, but his/her compensation level shall be set to reflect said duties." Now, this may need to be changed a little bit, because in Springfield, because you just referenced Springfield, the city clerk is appointed by the city council. We haven't made that decision here, so.
But we will eventually.
Yeah,
We can
right.
come
Yeah, we
back.
So
can
for
square
purposes
that
of
if
placeholder.
necessary.
Okay,
Mhm.
all right, okay. So
Second.
I made the motion,
Okay.
okay.
Discussion. All those
Yeah,
in-
just curious, if some of the towns have president or chair, vice president, and a clerk, that a clerk is a member of the council. What are the advantages of either having the town clerks serve as the clerk of the council, or having a member of the council?
So by
be the
law,
clerk?
if you hire a clerk of the council, they are responsible for maintaining the records
Right.
and keeping the
Correct.
minutes of the meeting and
Posting.
and, all that fun stuff. And I think that it would take away that individual's focus on actually paying attention to what's going on
Okay.
during the meeting and making decisions. It's almost like the same argument Dawn made
Mhm.
when we asked to get Marge.
Right.
Because thankfully you guys appointed me as clerk, and maybe I'd do less talking if I were the clerk, but,
That's a possibility. No, good.
Stop,
good.
Eric, don't.
I'm bleeding, I'm biting my tongue so hard.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay, motion passes. Very good. Next I see vacancies. And I know that in our homework, there were
Some
a
alternatives,
lot of
or-
alternatives.
So I am gonna put something out there. I don't have anything prepared, but I'm going to make a motion that the vacancies from the council be filled by the town council, and that there be no restrictions as to what we consider for a vacant town council position.
Yeah.
I don't believe, okay, I'll stop
Sorry,
at that.
right now, aren't we dealing with the vacancy of the president or
Yes.
the vice
Yes.
president?
Yeah, we're under the heading
Council?
of president, vice
Regular-
president.
We haven't, yeah, you're jumping way ahead.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I know we're
And I
getting
was
there.
kind of too,
Okay.
once he went
Okay.
down the road of the, okay.
So the language
So-
suggested here, I think, again,
Yeah.
Yeah,
meets the needs.
Right.
So I'd make the motion, vacancies which occur in the offices of president or vice president shall be filled at the next regular council meeting following the vacancy. All appointments to fill the vacancies shall be for the remainder of the original one-year term of office.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes.
I have a question.
Wait,
Town, well, it hasn't gone to the ballot. If the town clerk is incapacitated, do we need language in here that the assistant town clerk would serve?
I would think that would be covered as if the assistant town clerk is stepping in statutorily to take over the role of clerk.
Mhm.
But it's an interesting question. We can look into that and confirm that that's okay.
And so can you also look in this question, so if, I think one thing we had when we talked about the president, we had the president shall appoint members of the committees of the council.
Yes.
So what happens if you have a new president? Do they then change all the committees midstream? Or do we address that, or do they address that when they establish their rules?
I think they address that when they establish the
Yeah,
rules.
yeah, I would.
Okay.
Anything else there? Okay, next up is council procedures.
Just, well, I don't, just one little
Jump
thing
in,
before we
yeah.
go, only because we did add this. I know that, what are the two towns? Winthrop
Winthrop and Watertown have a very different method of selecting their president. I don't know if you saw that, you've already voted on this, so we probably move quickly by it. But those two towns actually elect their council president independently of the at-large seats. So you go and you elect, they each have some at-large, they each have some district, and then they have the town council president. Just want to make sure that you saw that. It may or may not work.
Yeah.
We saw it. Okay, there we go. Check. I think
Next.
we have the same things written all over it.
Yeah.
Okay, now council procedures.
And oftentimes, this might be broken into a couple of different sections, and you'll see with our newer version here, I put general powers in with this as well, and general power, there's a few almost standard general power paragraphs in there. So that might be the thing we might want to look at first, if we want to put a general powers section right in here before we get to duties and exercises of power.
Well,
Okay.
council procedures.
I'm sorry. Now I'm the one that's skipping ahead.
So under the section council procedures, I think it's very well written. I think we need to put in the number 5 again. So
I
that,
disagree.
What?
No.
If a quorum of the council is required to call a meeting, then the quorum has to deliberate on calling the meeting, and that breaks the open meeting law.
I'm not following you, George.
If a quorum of a government body
Okay,
deliberates outside of an open meeting, that's a violation of the open meeting law.
correct.
Right.
So in order to get 5 people to agree to call a meeting, they're deliberating about the purpose of the meeting.
And they'd be
And you're
breaking.
breaking an
Okay?
open meeting.
Now,
Well,
if
yeah.
I call up Ralph and Russ and Tom and say, we need to have a meeting and the president doesn't want to call it to address this issue, we're deliberating as to whether or not we should have a meeting. I think that number needs to be 3, so it's not a quorum.
That's real, I understand what you're saying, but I think it's a broad interpretation.
I
was gonna go with 4, a simple majority.
thought about that, but we've been through this, ever since open meeting came in.
I know, but-
That you can't talk about stuff outside the meeting. You can't call each other up and say, let's have a special meeting. I mean, it doesn't work.
Well, so, would that be the case to call and say, we need to have a meeting? I mean, that's not really deliberating. That's not deliberating on the subject of what you're calling the meeting for. I mean, I think that's,
There is an interpretation that
Right, that's what I
follows
mean.
that line,
Yeah.
that says that if it is for procedurals and for setting meetings, you can have a discussion.
Okay. I just-
But it could be, we always have to keep in mind also what the public is seeing and
Yeah.
thinking.
But
So it could be seen.
Could that also be covered under their rules? If we don't
Could be.
anticipate put it in?
I wonder why you went with a supermajority and not just a majority.
Yeah.
Because this essentially is, to me, it's, I mean, we have here, they're gonna normally meet once a month. They'll probably end up meeting more, but, so it's kind of, to me, it says the president and then and/or kind of situation, or it specifically
Yeah.
says
Yeah.
or by. So essentially, you've got another situation where someone wants a meeting and the president said, just can't wait until, our regular scheduled meeting. And so you've almost, so the issue has to be so important that they're gonna override the normal, I guess, rules of the town council. And I think it should require
Can you check with the open meeting law whether that be violative of it?
Sure.
We can look into it.
Mhm.
It does appear that most of the other examples set that number below the quorum threshold.
Mhm. Yeah, we have a lot of threes, I think, for examples, yeah.
I find
Alright,
it,
then I'd be fine with that then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
it's irrelevant, I think, it's 3, 4, 5, when.
I would
we're
throw
gonna
that.
allow town employees and count on them to do the right thing.
Yeah, the council.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah.
Gotta get one little
Yeah.
Hold on, that's only one.
Yeah, that's coming.
If a minority can call the meeting, okay, they're not gonna control the meeting.
I'm not saying I don't have an
Okay,
issue with
so
control.
if they
Yeah.
hold the meeting and the other 4 members show up and say, we don't think we should be meeting on this subject right now, they can adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Or better
Okay.
yet, if the other members don't show up, then they can't hold the meeting.
They can hold the meeting, yeah.
But what if they simply can't contact the president?
Yeah, so
Something of some urgency.
is 3 pretty much the standard that you have in the other charts?
Looking through the ones, we can dig through others as well. The ones we have here, it does look, for those that are 9, I think it looks like 3 or 4.
Okay.
So just, slightly under
That's fine.
whatever the quorum would be.
Yeah, all right.
So, in light of that,
I'll make a motion to have the number be 3.
I'll second it.
Well,
discussion?
There's no motion on the floor to adopt this language.
Correct.
Well, the motion is to amend the language by inserting number 3 before we vote on it.
It'll accomplish the same thing.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, all in favor, say,
Aye.
signify by
Aye.
Against?
Now I'll make a motion to adopt the language as written. Unless you want to read through the whole thing.
The-
Or are we taking the whole thing or just the first paragraph? I thought
The
we were
whole
just.
thing to me is,
It's really good.
Yeah, it is. I'm
Yeah.
just,
I
point
would
of
second
clarification.
Say
George's
the whole
motion.
thing. Move the whole thing with number 3 in
Yeah.
it.
Okay, there is a second, yes? And discussion.
When you do the definitional section, are you going to define what personal notice means?
You can if you'd like.
I don't know what that means.
Oh,
Do we have to go and
Good point.
look at the person's face and tell them it's a meeting?
let's do a little research on
yeah.
it and
Yeah, we'll
see
get
if
it.
other people have defined it a
It's
certain
just-
way.
just
If
my
not,
anal
Yeah.
background.
no,
No,
that's
yeah,
not
we could probably
No, it's a good point.
infer what it
Yeah.
is, but
But with the, the advent of email and,
Mhm.
other things, you should probably,
versus the bulletin board thing, which is not.
What would
yeah.
that be their rules to establish? The
I don't
council's
know,
rules?
that's, I
Yeah.
think, one thing we're gonna ask them.
Yeah.
well, we could almost, we could make up a definition, obviously, that we
Mhm.
think
Right.
is fitting. We can see if other people have defined it, or
Okay.
we can leave it open, so.
Well, that's actually the language in there too. It says the council from time to time may establish written rules for its proceedings. I think that's what the intent of that is.
do we want to be more specific on the second paragraph, last sentence? The council shall adopt such rules and regulations as may include a reasonable advance notice requirement so the public participation shall occur in an orderly fashion. Is this where we want to include a guarantee of public participation? We've all had that discussion.
You know, because many of them have specific timelines in which you must notify the public, so they have enough time to.
And I think,
Participate.
correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think the intent of our previous discussions as it related to this subject matter was to make it so that they cannot exclude a public participation section, if you will, or, you know.
So you almost want to guarantee that each meeting either begin or end with a public speak out.
Yeah, public
For lack-
comment,
Public comment period, yeah.
Public input, comment period, whatever, I mean, yeah.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
And if no one comes, then you just continue your
Right, but
business.
it's
move
there,
on.
it's there.
Right.
Sure.
So I'm not sure how to,
Is it covered in the first sentence of that paragraph? And residents, employees, and any other interested party shall have a reasonable opportunity to be heard at any such meeting? Or, I mean, you can make it stronger for sure, but that does imply that all meetings will have.
you know, I think you're right,
I think
yeah,
that covers it, yeah.
yeah.
And-
Well, or do you want to define it with inserting during public comment period?
I would leave that to the council to set the
Yeah,
procedures
set
for
the
that.
rules, yeah. I would- I
They're
would
gonna have to
agree.
live with it.
Well, I know.
Yeah, I'd leave that to the rules, but I think that pretty much guarantees that they have to have
Yeah.
a voice.
Well, it sounds like they have to have a voice, but I think the line that you're talking about is stating that the public has to notify the council
Yeah.
that they want to speak 2 days in advance, 3 days in advance, 4 days in advance. That's what that line says to me.
No.
Let me read it
The
again.
council shall adopt such rules and regulations which
Which
may
may.
include a reasonable advance notice requirement, which means the public has to give the council advance notice of, I'd like to speak at that meeting with regards to X, Y, Z.
I don't interpret it that way. I
I'm gonna read the
interpret
whole
it,
thing again, the whole paragraph again.
the way I interpret it is advance requirement of the meeting, not the intent to speak.
Yeah.
Because if you continue, so that public participation shall
Occur
occur.
in an orderly fashion,
Right.
which means the public notifies you in advance, just like the Board of Selectmen's
No.
public forum.
I don't read it that way.
I think you gotta read it in the context of the entire paragraph. All meetings of the council and subcommittees thereof shall be open to the public and residents, employees, and any other interested party shall have a reasonable opportunity to be heard at any such meeting, except as otherwise provided by the laws of the Commonwealth regarding executive session.
Right, and that's exactly my point. They have the right to speak, but the council wants advance notice that they're going to be speaking.
No, I don't see that. I don't read that.
It says the council can adopt rules and regulations as it sees fit. And I think that is sufficient because, first of all, they have to answer to the voters. And secondly, they're the ones who are dealing with the meetings and the issues that are at those meetings. They're the ones who are going to have to set the rules that they can live with in order to allow public participation without having meetings degenerate, which can happen.
So, how about, listening to Ralph, and maybe we can just clarify this a little bit. So, shall be open to the public, residents, employees, and other interested parties shall be guaranteed an opportunity to be heard at any such meeting.
Well,
Because there's a difference between a public meeting and a public hearing. We all know the difference. We're
Right.
talking about their council meetings.
right, and I think that we need to be careful that people don't think they have a license to interject anything throughout the entire meeting.
I know that.
There's a time and a place for it within the meeting.
So in their rules, they'll establish in their rules a set 15-minute public comment period, if that's, the rule they set. But I think we're going to we're looking for some transparency, we're looking for public participation. And if you put kind of guaranteed the right, that might,
I like reasonable opportunity. Saying guaranteed really opens the doors. A reasonable opportunity is a reasonable opportunity. If you want to speak reasonably on a subject, you know, within a certain period of time, that's a reasonable opportunity. If you want to get up and rant and rave, that's a different thing.
But there is a big difference between a public meeting and a public
Oh,
hearing.
absolutely.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
do we want to give people a guarantee to be able to speak either before or after, not during, but, you know, a public meeting?
Well, that's why I said, do you want to insert something that says during a public comment period?
Yeah.
And put it in here as opposed to letting the
The-
council establish it. So we can satisfy everything.
I think we do. I think this language does. It says, open to the public and residents, employees, and any other interested party shall have a reasonable opportunity to be heard at any such meeting, except executive
Right.
session.
I mean, it is strong enough, and it is,
Yeah.
to me, it's transparent enough.
I think going forwards, let the council write the rules and regulations, and if they need to adjust it, like I said, I think I'm reading this different than what you're reading it. I think, like what we have now with the Board of Selectmen, we have a public forum opportunity. Anyone can speak at that public forum, but you have to give them 48 hours advance notice that you want to speak at the public forum. I think that's what it's saying, but I think the rules and regulations can adjust accordingly.
Well, what you're talking about is the rules and regulations that the Board of Selectmen have established. There's nothing in town
I'm going
ordinance-
forwards to what the council would
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
So, how about this? What if I offered a motion, I'm not offering the motion yet, because I don't want to, but what if I offered a motion to amend his motion to exclude that last two sentences? Because, to be honest with you, we don't need them.
Well,
Which
why
ones?
would you want time limitations?
You have to have time limitations.
Yes, you have to.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be in the charter. That can exist within their rules.
Well, all you're doing is give them the right to create time limitations. Rather than the citizens saying, hey, the charter didn't say anything about it, you're making arbitrary and capricious rules.
Okay, then what if I offered a motion that excluded the next to the last sentence and amended the last sentence that said any rules and regulations adopted by the council may also include time limitations on public input,
Public comment.
public comment.
That's all right.
Yeah.
That's excluding the sentence before that.
Yeah,
Yeah, take
the
that
sentence, let me just so that I'm
Which is-
clear, the
yeah.
council shall adopt such rules and regulations which may include reasonable advance notice requirement so that public participation shall occur in an orderly fashion. Eliminate that sentence, because
Okay.
it's,
And then the next sentence is,
right, such rules and regulations that may be adopted by the council, any rules or regulations adopted by the council may also include time limitations on public comment. Does everyone like that? Then I'll offer that as an amendment to George's original motion.
Second.
you second.
I second.
Okay, discussion.
So, I'll just say, so Eric and I disagree on,
Never happens.
no, I know. I was a little more lenient when I was chair of appropriations and allowed people to participate and, you know, have public comment, and he ran it more formally, I'm gonna put it, than I might. But I think it's an opportunity for us to kind of put a guarantee of a public comment period in there, so the public feels like, or they know that they can show up and there's gonna be a public comment period, and they don't need to sign up, 24 hours in advance kind of situation. And I think it's almost a goodwill that we're putting into the charter, that we want to encourage public participation. And if we put a guarantee that there will be a public comment period, I think the general public who might feel that, we're not gonna have town meeting, will have a guarantee of an opportunity to address the legislative board. That's
If you
my
wanted
point.
that, would you want to take out have a reasonable opportunity and put have an opportunity rather than reasonable. Because reasonable.
Or you insert guarantee.
Or
I think
established-
reasonable is very important for the
Yeah, I
think
president
it
to
is
be
too.
able to execute
Yeah.
the order
Yeah.
of the meeting. So I think the word reasonable really needs to stay there.
Somewhere in
Right,
there, yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And to Russ's comment, the use of the two verbs shall. That-
Yeah.
That they
Yeah.
have to,
Right.
it's not may.
Right.
See, the good lawyer argues that in court.
Send checks.
I mean, the council's gonna have to refer to this when they're establishing their rules too. And it's clear what our intent is. To guarantee the opportunity for the public to have an opportunity to speak.
A reasonable opportunity.
A reasonable.
Right.
But I'm gonna go back to Ralph's point. Shall have a reasonable opportunity to be established by the rules of the town council. I'm saying, why don't we make that more resident friendly? And guarantee an opportunity to be heard during a specific time period?
But we do. It does
No.
guarantee you.
No. But reasonable opportunity, what if yes, you can speak, but you have to sign up.
No,
I'm
that's,
not,
you know, we
I
removed
don't read
that.
that as signing up. Reasonable.
We eliminated that sentence
Right.
that could suggest that, or my motion.
Right.
Right.
We're gonna eliminate that sentence that could suggest that.
I'm not gonna be hung up on this, that's okay, all right, all right.
Then it really comes down to your interpretation of what's reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That-
that's
reasonable.
what I.
That's
That's
what I'm
what
trying to get
That
away
was
from.
But I
my
think
thought,
that's up to the
reasonable.
council to, they've got to establish their own rules here.
Yeah.
I know, but.
Why not take reasonable out? If they're gonna establish the rules, then why do you need reasonable in there?
I think we need reasonable in there. I think that's important.
I don't.
I do.
I disagree with you. I don't, what we're guaranteeing them, or what we want to guarantee them, that they do have an opportunity to speak. Now, they've got to follow some guidelines or rules that the council is going to establish.
That's where the reasonableness comes in.
And let the council
But
decide.
you're
then.
stating that in the next, that last sentence then. So you don't need reasonable up in the first sentence. You have an opportunity, and the council is going to establish some rules and regulations, which may include time limitations. That's where the rules come in. Take reasonable out of the first sentence and, just modify that last sentence.
I'm not gonna modify my motion to that.
Okay, so, but we have several,
So I need to ask a question. So do you agree with my point or not? I was having a hard time following that.
Yeah. I don't think that we need reasonable in there. I think that
Was reasonable almost,
You would state
I
that they
think
have an
because-
opportunity to be heard.
okay.
yeah,
Because,
that
Okay.
had been my
Okay,
point
yeah.
as well, that reasonable opens up to interpretation
Exactly.
of what
Okay.
is,
exactly.
but,
All right.
But what is opportunity, if you can go that far?
You have an
So
opportunity.
You've got 30 seconds.
But
it's better
But that's
that
not
could be-
reasonable,
No,
right?
it's not.
So that's why
Well,
leaving
well, yeah.
reasonable in, I think, benefits any citizen who wants to come forward.
Well, what's
see that
reasonable to me may not be reasonable to you. So I don't really see, because we're gonna, down below, we're gonna say, the council can establish the rules they want.
Right.
So,
So why do you need reasonable in there?
Because they couldn't make, I don't think they could make a rule of regulation saying a citizen has 90 seconds to speak. I don't think that would be reasonable if it ever went to court. But maybe 4 or 5 minutes would be reasonable.
That's too long.
Well, whatever. But if you don't
Can I
put
make a-
reasonable in, then can the council decide
Well,
if the
put
40 seconds and the person's not courteous?
reasonable in the last sentence then.
That's
Well,
fine.
include reasonable time
Yeah.
limit?
can I make a point to the chair?
Yes.
This argument is not pertinent to the motion on the floor. The motion on the floor is to amend his motion to remove the next to the last sentence and amend the last sentence of that paragraph. the wording that they're referring to is not included in that
Correct.
motion to amend. So from a clarity standpoint, can we move the
Call a vote
motion?
on that.
Call a vote on the motion to amend, which I can't call a vote on my own
Okay.
motion, can I?
Point of order, can you read the last sentence?
Yes. thank
Again.
you.
Marge, how did I word that? Because I didn't write it
I think I
down.
have some of it.
Yeah, I have a version of it as well.
I have a version too.
Well, it's scribbled.
Why don't you give me your version?
The version that I had scribbled down here was, any rules and regulations that are adopted by the council may include time limitations on public comments.
Perfect, that captures the intent of what I was.
I think it is exactly what you said.
Yeah.
Very good shorthand
And,
there.
and so you wouldn't accept a motion from Ray that says, would also include reasonable time limitations?
What I'm
We're
saying
going
is,
to-
why don't we dispense of this one before we move on to any other amendments to the original motion?
Okay.
Otherwise,
Because
it's
we're
just
getting
gonna get.
amendments
gets
on amendments
complicated,
on
yeah.
amendments.
Yeah,
and
okay.
That's
it's-
all I'm saying.
All
The
right.
chair's getting confused.
I'll call the question.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes.
Now, if anybody else wants to offer another amendment to the original motion made by George, it'd be a little bit more clear.
Anything?
I'll leave it the way it is. Judge, I
Okay.
don't think reasonable necessary in that first sentence, but,
Well, the town council will get to parse it out, I guess.
yeah,
Or we can revisit if we find
right.
other things. Now, as I said, that was the amendment.
That was an amendment.
And the original was on the whole shooting match
Yes.
here
Right.
with,
With the
Now with the amendment.
now with the
amendment.
amended
Right.
language.
Right.
All those in favor?
Hold it.
Yeah.
What, the number?
Three.
Three.
We voted on that already.
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
Yep.
Okay, so for the whole shooting match here, I'm not gonna read the whole thing. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. All right. It's now 10:08. We're moving.
How we doing? Are we moving along?
I think so.
Well, you're supposed to keep us on track.
Yeah, no, this is
Jump in
definitely.
whenever.
Well, let me just mention at this point in time, what I was hoping, before we leave tonight, leaving 10 or 15 minutes, I know we're spending all this time on the legislative article, which is terrific, but I want to make sure before we leave tonight that we do touch on the executive, just so that we can keep in mind, or you can ask us questions that we can go research, and we can keep in mind some of the big questions that we're going to be facing,
So
so.
I'm thinking ballpark in your vast experience in that, what time do you want me to shut down? We need half an hour to that? We did the meeting minutes, so that's out of the way. We may have some housekeeping items to do. I don't want to shut it down
Why don't we
yet,
just
but-
kind of go to that now then?
Yeah, we can always come back to this.
Yeah.
We're at a point where we finished one section, we can probably
Yeah, let's just
just
have
leave
a
it
general
and then start
discussion.
now.
Yeah, I think we've done a lot, so obviously we'll come back
Just
to this
wanted to-
at our next
So we're on
meeting.
general
Yeah.
powers
So-
and duties is next.
And what, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, what I'll plan on doing in terms of this is writing up to the best of my ability, obviously with edits
do
coming
a
from
fantastic
anywhere,
job.
of what we've decided on so far. Leave these last few sections kind of open and loosey-goosey, so we can, go over it the next time. And anyone can give me edits where they see I've, conflated anything. But that's the plan for next time, assuming that works for everyone. Okay.
So, we all received some homework as well. Obviously, executive is, we've got town manager,
So-
mayor.
So let me put something out there. So strictly informal. So I'm sure we've all thought about this before we ran for this commission. I mean, who here might have interest in a mayoral form of,
Say, I can't-
who here might have interest in a mayoral form of government moving forward for the town? Okay. Who, so that kind of begs the question, who doesn't? Okay.
And I didn't mean to
think-
assume, but
No,
we do have
no.
town manager and town administrator,
know.
so I'm happy to
Right.
put together.
Who, so we heard when we went to the Board of Selectmen that Mr. Federici was, I think in his, I think he specifically said he didn't know the difference between or didn't,
Between a town administrator and a town manager.
and/or a strong town administrator or a
Right.
weak town administrator. So is there anyone here, if we're talking town administrator, is anyone here who is interested in continuing with a weak town administrator's position?
When you say that,
I'd say with the,
but a Board of Selectmen would have the authority to give more powers on their own and make an administrator strong.
but we could also put it, because we don't have a charter, we could have put that into a charter? That we would have a weak town administrator kind of form of government? Am I correct?
You could. It's a little different, though, that without the Board of Selectmen
Yeah.
at the top of the
Yeah, food chain.
of the executive, having a weak town administrator leaves some question of where those responsibilities would go.
Okay.
So
So by going to a town council, we've effectively gone essentially to a mayoral form of government and/or town manager form of government.
yeah, I mean, there are still ways to make a town manager, town administrator stronger or weaker, obviously, but you've clipped off some of the ways you could make it very weak.
Okay, okay.
And
Well,
I-
that's kind of where I was trying to get us to.
I would make a suggestion at this point that we drop talking about strong or weak town manager. If we're talking town manager, then when we get to defining that person's powers, we can be more specific, because the term weak and strong are kind of ambiguous.
So what was kind of leading me up to that? So Dawn and I finally went to an appointment that had to be canceled 3 different times. We went out to South Hadley, and they have a town administrator, and we need to share that with them. So-
Well, and it's very relevant to this
Yes,
discussion.
so the title is town administrator, but he negotiated into his contract powers that essentially make him a strong town manager, which was kind of interesting. Go ahead.
May I make a point of clarification
Sure.
on that? So we worked with South Hadley, and they to help craft their executive. So they actually put through a special act prior to the current town manager being in place, or sorry, current town administrator being in place, that strengthened the office. Now, the interesting thing that ties to this is that the terms town manager and town administrator, traditionally town manager is stronger and town administrator is weaker, but statutorily there's nothing necessarily to say that. So just the point of clarification I want to make is that their town manager, town administrator position is anchored in a special act of the legislature that gives a town manager like
His powers.
yeah. So sorry, apologies.
And why I thought it was interesting to still make that visit was, so Mike Sullivan's the former mayor of Holyoke.
10 term.
No,
No.
10
10 or-
years,
10
5
years.
years,
Oh, okay.
5 terms. He
10
then went
years.
out to Acton, which was a town administrator's position. And then he's come back to South Hadley. And so we were very blunt with him, and we said, okay, Mike, you were a mayor for 10 years, and you're a town administrator, and what do you think? He says, you're crazy to go to a mayor. And he said, the reason you're crazy to go to a mayor is anybody can get elected. It's a popularity contest. He says, thankfully I was popular for 10 years. He says, but I didn't have any formal training. You can put into your charter, or, that what a town, what your qualifications and things, thank you, Ray, can be. It says if you go to a mayor, it's you could walk, I think he said, walk outside a bar and get elected.
Yeah.
Which he would hope wouldn't happen, but that was very compelling. I don't know how you felt about that.
I thought what was compelling was very similar, that he felt, he said, I was getting votes. He said, you know, I'm
yeah,
up for
yeah,
it,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I want the votes. He said, but when someone comes up and said, hey, gee, we were in 3rd grade gym class together, and, you know,
I
you
knew
were
you were
nice
going to be
me."
mayor someday.
Yeah, so I got the vote. He said, I'll take the vote. He said, but that's not how we should go. So I thought that was really illuminating. Very knowledgeable guy.
Can I
Yeah.
pick all of your brains?
Yeah.
I can see you dismissed the mayoral form.
No, I haven't, I
No,
just
I
missed it.
there's
but-
Okay, but
discussions there.
But what if you put that part of the mayoral form had to hire the equivalent of a town administrator?
Mhm. It's kind of like what Worcester does. Worcester has a mayor and they have a city manager.
Yeah.
But
I
but a
understand.
weak mayor system.
Yeah. And there are towns that I've seen that the town council elects a mayor,
Yeah.
which is kind of ceremonial, and then they hire a town manager.
But my question, if you're gonna do that, what do you
Why?
need a mayor for?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, how many ribbons do you need to cut in a year? The point being, you're creating another position that's gonna be paid, another layer of bureaucracy, if you will. If you're gonna have a town manager run the town, then have the town manager run the town. You don't really need.
And you have the council president almost act as the ceremonial elective person.
Right.
in the
He's out
community.
front. He's out front.
Eric?
Well, I thought a lot about this. Actually, Larry got me thinking about it because I knew he favored I don't know if favored the right term, had an interest in a mayor form. So I was thinking a lot about it. And I think the two things that convinced me are, number one, a town manager. We have the opportunity here to specify, training, experience, education as such at running a town. You don't get that opportunity with a mayor. The other thing that I think that kind of sealed it up for me was I was thinking about, where do we traditionally see mayors? We traditionally see them in the larger communities, the cities and things like that. And when a mayor gets elected, you're right, they don't know everything, but they bring a cabinet in with them that hopefully are the people with the experience and the education in municipal management. That's not going to be the case here. We're not going to have a mayor and a whole council come in. I mean, we're just, I don't think we have a whole cabinet coming in. I don't think we have an interest in raising the cost of our core government operations like that in this town. So that's kind of what drove me. Those two are the major driving factors for what I think is the way for us to go is the strong town manager, or the town manager, if you will. We can define what their role is in the charter.
In terms of mayor, what I did find in some of my searchings that was interesting to me that I had honestly never thought of. I had a discussion with our former state senator, Brian Lees, and he said, in regards to mayor, he said, this is one thing I will tell you. At the state level, you will get attention if you are a mayor. He said, if you're a town, you don't pay attention to town councils, and you won't necessarily get the money, the bacon coming back. Having said that, however, our Western Mass delegation is not that strong. And so can't say that that's a direct correlation. That was one of the things that I did not understand, that he said if a mayor comes and talks to a state leader, they're more apt to get action than not. I don't know that that's really germane to what we need. I mean, it's always nice to get the bacon, but
Well, how long did it take our Board of Public Works? And I was with Dan Burek yesterday and talked to him and said, it's great to see all the road construction going on in town. I said, how long did it take you to save up all that money?
Yeah.
And he was just shaking his head, because most of the money we get, in fact, it is formula-based.
Right.
It has nothing to do
It
with
took
bringing
us-
home any bacon.
I mean, there's
15
no-
years to get Elm Street funding.
Yeah, but that was all tied, it was all tied up in bureaucracy. I don't think,
Yeah.
it was, you know, the history of that is, even if we had a mayor, I don't think it would have sped it along. There were so many different layers, and it got pushed down on a list, and, I mean, nobody could do anything about it. It just, you had to wait its turn to come up.
I wonder if the reason that the state legislatures listen to a mayor is because they come generally from cities of larger
Yes.
size. So they're looking at votes or whatever. I don't think a mayor of East Long Meadow would get the same hearing or feel or
Courtesies.
yeah, it wouldn't be as pertinent. Thank you. If mayor of East Long Meadow approached a legislator as the mayor of Springfield. I also think that a town manager, that this is the one opportunity that we have to have an official in charge of the operation of our community, who we can, when we hire him or her, we can look at their track record and say, you managed a town, you have the education, we've gotten good reviews, what you've done in another community. And I think that's, to me, is one of the most important things that we can do for East Long Meadow, is to put a person in that position who does have those qualifications.
And I'll just say that I agree that having a professional run the town is my impression of the way to go. One of the reasons I'm not in favor of a mayoral structure is just reading the newspaper for the last 20 years. There are some really great mayors out there, and then there are some mayors that have caused their towns untold damage, financial and otherwise, by their actions, particularly when they fire people for the wrong reasons and then get sued for millions of dollars because of a political decision. I just, it bothers me that I think any town these days needs professional management. It really does. You can't just say, who gets the most votes, run the town.
Right.
I would only offer too that if you look back over recent history of some of the recent Board of Selectmen that we've had, that some of the problems, which is quite frankly one of the reasons we're all sitting here. And what if they were mayor?
Yeah.
Well, to that point, Attorney Levine made a great point. You know, you can have a mayor that doesn't have a lot of power. Towns, people like to vote for mayors. I mean, they enjoy voting for mayor. I voted him in. I mean, you hear it all the time. And if we had someone else that was literally running the town, I mean.
So let me, so how many communities can you think of in Massachusetts that have Larry's model, where you have a council and they elect a mayor who also presides at the council?
Oh, I
There-
wouldn't
there are-
have I wouldn't have
Yeah.
the council elect them.
No.
Oh, I thought you were talking now.
No,
Okay.
no.
You would just go to straight electorate.
That's correct.
Okay.
And I'm not totally
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
position, but that I think the people in the town want someone at the top of the pyramid. And who, if there's a problem, they oversee everything. The council, the legislative body, has not been the executive within our town. So most of these are changing where the council hires a town manager. And so the legislative body is hiring the administrator of the town. I don't know, it just doesn't feel right yet.
Well, the other thing is they can also fire the administrator of the town.
Right.
So if the person is not responsive and is not doing the job, there will be mechanisms in place to be able to remove the individual, much like an election,
Mm-hmm.
for the mayor. So that individual needs to be responsive to the electorate, which is also the residents of the town. Otherwise, their contract isn't renewed or they're let go. So it's much like an election, but with a smaller group of
It
people.
is.
So doing that, we're greatly expanding the powers of our legislative body.
Yeah, so you want to quickly have that little conversation. So it's, the town council is replacing the legislative body, but it also is taking on some executive functions.
Right.
So,
Right.
so I agree with that they are.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I
I know.
understand that.
Yeah.
And that's a change in and of itself.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But like, I think the example you and I just quickly talked about was like licensing. So
Mhm.
like now the Board of Selectmen, and I think the planning board gets involved in like liquor licenses, right?
No.
No?
No.
Oh, I got that, okay. So who issues the liquor licenses?
Board of
The Board of
Selectmen.
Selectmen.
Okay. So the town council, I would suspect, would vote on liquor licensing.
Usually,
Right.
either that's the predominant way. They can also appoint a separate licensing board if
Yeah,
they
they
so
could.
desire.
Okay.
But
That's what we
Right.
talked about. So they potentially are taking on some executive functions, the
Mhm.
town council would be.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
I guess I see 7 rather than 1 from the electorate.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, my thoughts have always been, we've got to figure out a way to do it more efficient. I think we've all recognized that. All right. I have had, in a town like this size, I have serious reservations about trying to elect a mayor right off the bat. We got to clean it up first and give the council the authority to hire an efficient person to run the town operations day to day. Put enough systems, a system of checks and balances in there, to Russ's point, to make sure that whoever doesn't run rampant. And hopefully, because I think we can do it more efficiently. This is the opportunity.
So essentially what we're doing is we're having the town council elect the chief executive officer of the town,
In essence,
rather
yes.
than the electorate.
Right.
And then we have the electorate elect the town council.
So there's just different layers.
Yeah.
There's checks and balances, because if you screw up, you're not gonna get reelected,
Now,
in
just,
theory.
just to make a point here, right now, our legislative body is town meeting, which is theoretically all the voters in town. The same legislative body elects the executive, which is the Board of Selectmen. Okay? Yeah.
Well, in theory.
In
And
theory.
In theory.
If you look at the way the
Because we only
warrant
have,
is-
sometimes we only have 150 people at town meeting.
But if you look at the way the warrant is put together, okay, the election is part of the warrant,
Mhm.
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So,
I mean,
for
we-
clarity here,
Yeah.
do we have things that we would like Tanya and Mike to look up forward? Yes.
If I could. So I guess I'd like to see if there's statutory language that reflects a strong town manager, a weaker town manager, town administrator, because sometimes there's very little difference. And so I want to see what is in the statute that might outline powers versus for the town manager versus the town council.
I'm not. So you have pretty wide discretion to craft the powers and duties of the town manager position.
So I guess we need some examples.
You got them.
You got it.
Yeah,
All right,
and
I
we
got
can,
so
we
much.
can
I
look
think we
into
need some more, though.
And we could also, I mean, if we want to continue this mayoral discussion, I included only towns that had this form of government, town administrators or managers. We could find some mayoral language as well. We can include that. Or if there's any municipalities you know of that, you know, you'd like us to grab, we can do that as well. But just more.
Do you want to send around what we got from South Hadley?
Yeah, I can do that. I'll put it on Google Drive. I'll attempt to.
All right, thank you.
The only recommendation that I have here of it coming from, well, it's no secret, it's been in the paper lately, but coming from a community where the charter was less than clear, defining the roles between the executive branches, if you will, or the executive powers identified in the charter. I suspect we're probably going to, from the way it looks like, we're probably going to end up going with a town manager, I think, even if we don't. However, we need to really be very clear in defining those roles and powers clearly. Where does that line differentiate between the council and the executive branch? And I think that's, regardless of which one we go with, I think the best thing we can do for the town is to be very clear in that aspect of it.
Well, it'll help identify for the council right out of the gate.
It will.
Yeah.
Because
And
right now,
if you run, here's what your
yeah,
responsibilities are going to be.
You're going to know, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to what's going on now.
Well, and what I've seen is the opposite, where the elected official wants to do things that are not the responsibility
Right,
of the.
but we've got to get away. We've got to get away from that. Because
Well,
I think,
and that's why I think
Right.
it's got to be clearly
agree.
identified in here.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say, as you're thinking about this, probably the most important set of responsibilities to consider, review the options, review the different types that are out there is the HR responsibilities of the town manager position, particularly in terms of hiring, firing, discipline. That is where I see a lot of charter committees and commissions spending most of their time on the executive, is thinking about who has what appointment authority, what checks and balances are built into that, and how does it all mesh together. Secondarily, I would say things like contracting, procurement, and the budget, although some of that, because you've moved away from the Board of Selectmen, some of that is a little bit clearer.
Budgeting.
Yeah.
I mean, right now we have an appropriations committee. Do we want to keep an appropriations committee or a finance committee, or would you give it to the town council and a town manager to do it all? I mean, so we have to add that as well.
There's a lot of layers to it.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot of layers because, you know, one of the interviews I did out, I think it was Sturbridge, Ray and I met with Leon Goldman, and he talked about budget and how they, you know, what his role is, but they have a finance committee who as an advisory, because whoever this person is going to be an expert in every area, and he's going to need help.
Long Meadow has a finance committee, right?
A lot of
They
towns
do. It's really interesting, though. It's the finance committee in Long Meadow prior pre-charter change was very much like it is in this town, where they were the sole recommending body at town meeting to the legislative branch. They no longer recommend to the legislative branch, they recommend to the Board of Selectmen. The budget that comes to the town meeting is the Board of Selectmen's budget. It's not even the town manager's budget, it's the Board of Selectmen's budget. So that has created a tremendous amount of strife, discord.
So we would essentially have to think about the town, really, whether the town manager creates the budget that then goes to the town council.
Right.
So we're kind of taking part of that out.
Probably a finance committee to advise.
There's got to be
the
something
manager.
I will say that the majority of council managers do not retain a FinCom other than as a subcommittee of the council, but there are a few that do. It's usually in a purely advisory fashion, and frankly, what often happens is that happens at the beginning of after a charter change, and then after 5 or 10 years, someone says, "Why do we have a finance committee and separate from the council?" and that goes away. So.
things for, in pertaining to executive branch? I imagine we'll have some more homework.
Yeah, and what I can do is add these additional examples so that we'll just have lots of the powers and duty, especially obviously in the powers and duties section. We're very curious about all of those. So the only thing I can recommend is you highlight, highlight
And maybe rank. I mean, I went through and I was ranking what I liked so that the cream can come to the top, and we talk about that rather than the lower levels.
Also, in the meantime, if anyone has any questions as they're reading it and ranking it, or whatever the case may be, if you funnel them through Dawn, we can research them in advance too before the next meeting.
So are there any smaller communities that have Larry's model?
Are you talking about where the mayor is out of council?
No. Yeah, the mayor is not a town councilor, but it's elected, and then they also have a town manager?
Not a town manager. There are a couple that have positions that are, I would say, somewhere in between a town manager and stronger than a CFO or chief of staff, but weaker than a town manager. So Newburyport's title, I think, is CAO. They have the mayor and a chief administrative officer. There's one or two others out there like that. I would not in any way classify that position as like a town manager, but it is someone who's sort of got an eye on the day-to-day operations. Again, somewhere between a chief of staff and a town manager.
But the final say is the mayor.
Absolutely. There are a couple of larger cities that have strong. So Springfield, after the control board, had a CAFO, or I think still has a CAFO that has statutory power. Lawrence, similarly, a couple others in that boat, but those are much larger. And to your earlier question about the mayor coming out of council, there are only 3, and it's Worcester, Cambridge, and Lowell. It's a very sort of anachronistic form. It's still called Plan E, and they're the only 3 left in the Commonwealth that have that, where the mayor is elected by council, and basically it's a ribbon cutting, and then they each have a strong city manager for the executive function.
On these cities or towns that have this mayor form, is that a full-time position for the mayor?
Yes, I believe so. The pay varies wildly, but it is a full-time.
40-hour week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other research questions you want us to?
Not right now.
These guys.
Thank you.
And again, any questions? I would prefer the questions to be sooner than later, so over the next week. I think, how do you feel on our scheduling here?
When are we supposed to be done with the legislative branch?
We have one more meeting?
Well, it might have been today, but
That's what I'm worried about. Is
That was my
which
concern.
isn't. I mean, it's not surprising that that's taking us a significant amount of time.
It's
Should
2
not
weeks
be
from
found.
now.
So we're gonna have one more meeting for Labor Day.
well, that's what I'm.
So
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Labor Day is
Labor Day,
September
that's
8th,
Seventh or
7th,
eighth.
yes.
so maybe we could kind of decide then. We need to start going weekly.
See where we get next week.
Yeah.
Next
I mean,
2
we've got-
weeks, and then we can revise if we need to step it up. Because we do have that public hearing for
Right.
October 15th, which
Yeah, you go.
is,
Okay.
Well, I think their biggest
Good.
concern, I think, we were kind of give a midway where we are. And
Yeah.
if we have 2 more meetings, I think we're probably gonna wrap
no,
up
where,
the
Major
major
components.
components of it.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
And
so
then we'll know whether we're really going down the right road or
Yeah,
not.
we will. Yeah. Because after that, we might be meeting weekly.
Daily.
Daily. Yeah.
So we have a sizable amount of information still to complete for the
Yeah.
legislative.
Yeah, we do.
So if we don't want to tack on a meeting, then I think we all just need to make the commitment at our next meeting that if we go past 8:30, we go past 8:30. We need to.
Yeah.
At some point, we're
Yeah.
gonna
So
have.
I don't know which everyone wants to do, but I'd like
I'm
to.
fine with that.
Well, I mean, let's see what, let's do what we have to do at the next meeting and then go from there.
Sounds good.
Yeah, except that we
With,
run into holidays.
let's
Well, I
put
know.
let's put the caveat here that if we get really stuck on something, we move through, we get done what we have to in legislative, and maybe we'll only be stuck on one or two things, and then we
Yeah.
could come and see where we sit, whether we have to stay longer or add another meeting. I also don't want these guys going home at 3 a.m.
Right.
But
We're here, we might as well, yeah.
camp out
Stay for an
overnight.
extra, you know, whatever.
So everyone's homework is to read, have a clear idea of what you want for the rest of legislative. Read, and we will get the additional information to you on executive branch, and try and have a clear idea, especially on what I like is where we have consensus, we move forward, kind of like
Yeah.
town meeting, and where we don't, we're gonna have to go back and craft the language.
Can I make a quick addendum on the legislative piece? So there's a couple subsections coming up that can get, different charters handle them very differently. Some that are all part of one, some that are two, some that are in different orders. But generally what we're talking about is left, the main piece that's left, well, there's two main pieces left, but one of them is the general powers, duties, ordinances, and it's broken up in a bunch of different ways, but basically thinking about how that all fits together. And then separate from that, the vacancy question, which you got into a little bit already, so.
Right. Yeah. very
And
good.
hopefully, and
I
I'll.
was way ahead of myself on that one.
That's right.
You should have just let us figure it out, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And hopefully when I put together where we are so far, we'll be able to see it clearly. You know, I'll try and delineate it fairly clearly, what we have left and our different options there, how to craft it. So-
Well, it just blows me away how some town charters are 14 pages and
Yeah.
some are 52.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
How specific you want to be, yes.
Yes.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.